Hello. Thank you for joining us. My name is Lena. I work at the International Labour Organization. I would like to introduce a bit background information about the webinar. As you know, there are estimated 180 to 220 million young persons with disabilities around the world. Persons with disabilities are among the most disadvantaged groups when it comes to getting a decent job and progressing in their careers. Unfortunately, then young age and disability are combined. The labor market situation is even more challenging. This webinar aims to spotlight good corporate practices and experiences from around the world that support young persons with disabilities in entering and staying in decent work, including through disability mainstreaming in vocational skills initiatives. International sign language interpretation and live captioning is provided for this webinar. Please feel free to type your questions and comments in the chat and the Q&A box. I would like to invite now Mami to speak about the Youth Foresight platform.
Thank you, Lena, and warm welcome to all the participants and distinguished speakers who have joined us today from around the world. My name is Mami Kyo, and I'm a program consultant at Generation Unlimited, which is a public-private youth partnership platform anchored in UNICEF. And before we dive into the main part of the webinar, as a background, I would like to briefly share about what Youth Foresight knowledge sharing webinar is. So Youth Foresight is a one-stop shop for curated tools, publications, database, and different sort of resources to support evidence-based actions for key youth interventions. And the platform was launched in 2021 and is jointly hosted by ILO's Global Initiative on Decent Jobs for Youth, as well as Generation Unlimited. And as part of the knowledge dissemination and exchange efforts of Youth Foresight, we organize knowledge sharing webinars to facilitate the sharing of good practices, evidence, and engage opportunity with broader stakeholders. So that is kind of the background of what is Youth Foresight and why we have this knowledge sharing webinars. And I definitely would like to invite you to visit the Youth Foresight platform and explore the knowledge resources, join our online community forum, and future webinar events. And if any partners are interested to jointly host a webinar through Youth Foresight in 2023, please do reach out to us. Okay, on that note, I would like to hand over the baton to Bowen, who will be our moderator for this webinar. Thank you, and over to you, Bowen.
Thank you very much, Mami, for the introduction. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Bowen Tang, and I am the president of the International Federation of Hard of Hearing Young People. It is my pleasure to be the moderator today for this webinar. And a little bit about myself. I have a profound hearing loss in both ears since I was 2 years old. And so my role at my organization is to provide support to young people with hearing loss, which includes giving them the tools and resources that they can find inclusive employment. So today, the webinar will focus on two parts, where we'll start off with some knowledge sharing presentations by our speakers, followed by an engaging discussions with the speakers and yourself at the last half of the session. So please do use the chat box to ask your questions so we can include your participation in this webinar. Before we officially get started to hear the presentations, let us start with a poll for all of you to get an idea of who is with us today at the webinar. So if I may ask Maya to launch the poll, and you will see the pop up and you can answer the two questions. So the first one is, I would like to know what is your current employment status to see how many people here are currently employed or are seeking employment. And then also the second question is, do you self-identify as having a disability or an impairment? So you can answer yes or no, or prefer not to say. So we'll take a moment for you to answer the poll, and then we will look at the results. So give it about a minute. Okay, so let's see what the results are. So if we can post the results, Maya. All right, thank you. Looks like 82% of us here are employed full-time, and that's the majority of the people on this webinar. And 71% of the audience here do not identify as having a disability, whereas 27% identify as having a disability. Okay. So the next final question, as we get warm up, is we want to get an idea of what your opinion is on how you would address a person with disabilities in your workplace. So for this one, we invite you to use the chat box to share your thoughts on what's the appropriate way to address a person with disabilities in your workplace. So please take a moment to type in the chat box and we can have a look at what your thoughts are, because that's very important to be the foundation of setting an inclusive workplace. Okay, so let's take a look. All right, so looks like the chat box is disabled, so please do feel free to use the Q&A as well. All right, so some comments that are coming up on meeting the needs so they're able to get to their job, right? Equal treatment, breaking the barriers, okay? Recognizing the strengths, okay? That's all very positive ways of looking at it, okay? And definitely addressing people with disabilities by their names, okay? Celebrating the differences in strengths and changing the beliefs and mindsets. Okay, so these are all fantastic responses. Thank you very much for contributing. So with that, we're now heading to the knowledge sharing of our webinar today. We have a total of 5 speakers. So I will introduce them and then they will come up and share their presentation. So first up, I would like to invite our first 2 speakers, Jürgen and Haibin, and they will both introduce the work of the International Labour Organization or the organization's action in supporting decent jobs for youth. So welcome, Jürgen and Haibin, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bowen, and it's great to be with you all today. My name is Jürgen Menze. I'm a Disability Inclusion Officer at the International Labour Organization. I'm a middle-aged white man wearing a beard and a light blue shirt, and I'm also the coordinator of the ILO Global Business and Disability Network, of which a Chinese chapter is one of the national business and disability networks. Now, I have a few minutes, I hope, to set a little bit the scene of how we from the International Labour Organization approach the promotion of employment for young people with disabilities. I'll now share a presentation I've prepared. So a few reminders. Let's just look at a few things, I think, to get onto the same page. 180 to 220 million people with disabilities are young people with disabilities around the world. So it's a massive number. It's not just a few. And marginalization happens due to the 2 factors, age and disability, the intersecting identities of young age and disability. And that happens in all parts of society, but also, of course, in the labor market, which we are talking about here, and of course, in the International Labour Organization. The challenges we face when we talk about youth is that there's typically an educational and skills mismatch. So employers are looking for skills and education that is not always the one that young people have. And of course, since young people usually have had little experience, little opportunities to gain work experience, that can be a challenge for youth in general. Now, when we talk about persons with disabilities in general, there are very many attitudinal and physical and digital barriers that make it more difficult for persons with disabilities to enter and stay in the labor market compared to persons without disabilities. Now, combining then the challenges of young people with the challenges of persons with disabilities, it's not 1 + 1 = 2 in this case, but it's aggravated exclusion and discrimination that young people with disabilities face in the labor market. And what makes it even more challenging is that labor market statistics on young people with disabilities are not always available, but I'll say a little bit more about that in a second. Now, just also another reminder that all the work, the International Labour Organization, the UN system, but also, of course, the member states in the UN system is geared towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. And the Sustainable Development Goal 8 is specifically important, of course, for the ILO mandate, because it's about employment and decent work. And when we look into the specific targets of Sustainable Development Goal 8, it's good to see that it mentions target 8.5, specifically young people and persons with disabilities. That means by 2013, so we have another 8 years to achieve full and productive work, both for young people and persons with disabilities. And then another youth-related target within the Sustainable Development Goal 8 is that by 2020, so that was 2 years ago already, substantially reducing the proportion, so the share of young people who are not in employment, education, or training, or acronym NEET, N-E-E-T. And here's some statistics on how it's actually going. What is the labor market situation for young persons with disabilities? So they are more likely to be NEET, so not in employment, education, or training, and they are up to 5 times more likely than their peers. So they're without disabilities. So young persons with disabilities, and young we talk about 15 to 29 years, are up to 5 times more likely to be not in employment, education, or training compared to those without disabilities. And on average, youth with disabilities are roughly twice as likely to be NEET than their peers without disabilities. And then talking about the gender dimension of all of it, because we're addressing basically here 2 intersecting identities, young age and disability. But of course, there are other intersecting identities, including gender identity, that we see that young women with disabilities are even higher, the rate of not in employment, education, or training. Now, let me just finish with this slide. What has the ILO been doing to address intersecting identities of young age and disability? As the Global Initiative on Decent Jobs for Youth, which is not my part of the ILO, but I'm happy to also talk about that. The Global Initiative has been mainstreaming disability issues from its very beginning in its 8 thematic priorities and keeps doing that. They also produced a policy brief on making digital skills initiatives inclusive of young persons with disabilities. Just came out this year. If you haven't had a chance, please check it out. It's a very interesting publication. What we have been doing in the ILO Global Business and Disability Network, which I'm coordinating, is that we try to include young people with disabilities in disability-specific initiatives, so initiatives for persons with disabilities in general, but making sure that young people with disabilities also benefit. And we have been doing this, for example, in the Digital in Demand initiative in Asia, and my colleague Haibin in China will talk more about that, I'm sure, after me. And we also, a few years back, already 8 years back, we did a compilation of company practices, because what we do in the Global Business and Disability Network is, of course, working with companies all the time. So looking at corporate practices on including young people with disabilities. We launched a publication some 8 years ago. And then the final remark is that the ILO statistics department, very interestingly, has very useful databases. As the statistics I shared earlier are from these databases. So we have, on the one hand, we have the youth labor market indicators, which you can disaggregate by disability status. So if you're interested in youth employment, you can see how are youth without disabilities comparing to youth with disabilities. And on the other hand, we have the disability labor market indicators, where you can also disaggregate by age. So well, I encourage you to check out these resources that are now here on the screen. And with this, I would stop for now, but happy then to engage in questions with you later on. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Jürgen. Now, can I ask Haibin to continue the presentation?
Sure. Thank you, Bowen. I would like to activate my camera. It says the host. Okay, so I can. Good. I have a slide to show, and thank you for giving me this opportunity. And you can just have a very wonderful beginning about ILO GBDN. And I work for ILO GBDN China chapter. I'm the coordinator, and also I'm the founder of a social enterprise called the Easy Inclusion, which is promoting inclusive employment for people with disability in China. So I will share with you some practice that I hope you can find it relevant to your practice. So a little bit background about our China chapter. It's launched in 2018, July 31st. Now we have 21 company members. 16 of them are multinationals, and 5 of them are Chinese companies. So I would like to share some practice. I find it very amazing to see their growth from the beginning. One is our Vice Chair of China chapter, Flex Zhou. So their barrier-free program journey is quite have a big progress from 2015. At that time, they have 13 people with disabilities. And now,
Haibin, sorry to interrupt. I just need to pause because the interpreter is not visible. So can we spotlight Tina as well to make sure that people can see her as well?
Sure.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Sorry for the interruption. Please continue.
Okay, sure. So in the 7 years, the company started with people with disability internship program. So in the internship program, they invite students from different type of disabilities to have a trial in the workplaces and try the barrier-free conditions. And their kind of report after their internship is sent to their barrier-free committee. So the company to know where are the barriers and how to improve it through the report. And then they start to have awareness training among their senior managers and have a kind of change their workplaces and procedures that makes it accessible to people with disability. One thing I want to highlight is that in 2019, they have a 5th program, which is including people with intellectual disability into their factory lines. Now they have 21 people with autism and people with other type of intellectual disability in the company. So that's one example. I find it quite amazing. This is their internship program. When we have a kind of started those kind of internship program in our other China chapter members, we find that the companies who have the internship program, it's much easier to have a successful inclusive employment, to have a real employment for other type of people with disability. So the internship builds the confidence of the student with disability, and also the manager of and the mentors of non-disabled persons, colleagues in the company. So this is the first example. The second example is Accenture is working with NGO in China on data annotation skill training for people with disabilities. So in the last 3 years, they have trained more than 1,900 people with disability on computer skills, especially on data annotations. And they developed the AI business and also some tech companies who have the needs for people with disabilities providing jobs. So those kind of trainees will be able to have in advance have the future positions available so that they know that what kind of skill needed for their future working opportunity. So this is one of the example we find quite successful in China. The next one is L'Oreal China. We work with their customer center of L'Oreal China in Guangzhou. We train 15 people with disabilities in a vocational school called Guangdong Lingnan Senior Vocational Institute. So in the 2 months vocational training, students get soft skills and confidence in working in the inclusive working environment. And also the managers, HR directors also visit the vocational schools and introduce to the students and the trainees that what kind of culture and what kind of skills they needed when they will go to work in L'Oreal China. So we find that those kind of working collaboration will help both the companies to prepare working with students, and also the students will know that what kind of challenge they will face when they go to the workplaces. So those this kind of collaboration results in drive people with disability get real employment in L'Oreal China, and now their performance is highest in the customer service center team. And L'Oreal China also with working with other company like JD.com on inclusive beauty program. And the online platform provides 300 jobs providing services to other people. So I give you a little bit introduction what we will do in the next 3 years in China chapter. We find that Cisco Academy working with 3 talents and which result in more than 92% of their trainees get Cisco certificate and they are employed. We find that this is very encouraging. So we want to learn from that. So China chapter is working with Dalian University of Technology and the Training Institute so that we will develop a digital in-demand training curriculum. We are working with IBM, Accenture, and EY, and try to find what kind of job available in the next 3 years. So our ambition,
thank you so much for
Bowen.
thank you so much for sharing all of these great examples. We're being mindful of the time, so to continue the knowledge sharing, I'd like to invite the next speaker to come up, and that is Patricia Matlou, and she will share about some examples that employers have been taking, particularly from the Accenture SA Disability Employability Cadet Program. So the floor is yours, Patricia.
Thank you so much, Bowen, and hi, everyone. Just as a way of introduction, my name is Patty or Patricia from Accenture South Africa. I'm an Inclusion and Diversity Associate Manager, African female, wearing a dress and spectacles. And yeah, thanks for the opportunity. So I just want to share with you our program, which was specifically crafted around persons with disability and specifically around youth with disabilities in South Africa. Accenture employability career opportunities for our youth with disabilities, and also to help them obtain, a qualification within ICT sector. So in South Africa, as per legislation, youth will refer to persons between the age of 15 and 34. So this program focuses on candidates from what we call in South Africa previously disadvantaged backgrounds. And for them to qualify for this program, they need to have completed high school, what we refer to as matric. And what we need from them is that they need to have at least passed mathematics and English. The reason being that, within ICT sector, these two subjects plays a great role. So this program started in 2016. And when we started, it was a 3-year program. And, as the years goes by and progresses, and we realize how IT changes, rapidly. So we decided to keep this program as a 2-year program. And we've actually partnered with one of the great service providers that are actually experts within training and around, persons with disability, KLM. So what we did is that KLM took over the training from us. So they are hosting our learners, whereby they're gonna do 70% on the job learning and the 30% theoretical learning. So at the end of the program, the cadets would have received what we refer to as NQF level qualification and NQF level 4 and NQF level 5 qualification, over a period of 2 years. And these qualifications combined, they are actually equivalent to what we call a national diploma. So basically the first year they will do systems development, and we are very intentional around this because this is an employability cadet program. And within the ICT sector, Accenture is an ICT or technology company. So there was actually a gap in terms of hiring persons with disability around technology space. So this was one of the reasons why we actually started this program, because we tried to close this gap, in that, generally, and I don't think it's only South African problem, getting persons with disability within the ICT sector is quite limiting. So this program was specifically created, to ensure that we close that gap. And also as part of our disability inclusion, in South Africa, we feel obligated, to ensure that, disability inclusion is received, with open arms. So the program serves as the best vehicle, for attracting and retaining, persons with disability within the sector. And what we've also done is that, the 70% on the job training, it's actually, we also requested the supplier to do that, so that they get, individual attention and, the knowledge that, we are expecting them, to do. So we create meaningful career opportunities for them. And what we also did as an Accenture is that, we actually open up this training. Yes, Accenture is responsible, it's training, it's actually financing that, but we are not keeping the learners, just for ourselves, for future employment. We have other partnership where people, if they really want to hire them, we give them opportunity to do that. So we're not just closing it to say you can only work for Accenture. For various reasons, other people might not necessarily be Accenture fit, or they might not necessarily like what we are doing, but they would be, more meaningful with other organizations or other partners. But, what we are really doing is to make sure that we actually maximize numbers in terms of ICT qualification, particularly for persons with disability. So we believe that, our rich diversity, makes us more successful, at Accenture, and such opportunities like this create actually innovation and, competitiveness, with other potential employers, and also for the cadets themselves. So this program actually is has been successful, and we got very great feedback from other people that might have completed the program. Actually to date, we have trained over 50 learners with disabilities. We started only with 10, and the numbers are growing, every year. Like currently, we've got 25 people that are on the program that will complete in the next 2 years. So, we measured our success also in terms of, where are people employed, and the fact that, the qualification that they have is something that they're going to keep forever, and they can, work wherever they see it fit. So we really got great feedback, from those that have completed. One of the sort of our pride with this program is that we had a cadet who actually never saw a computer in his life, and the first time he actually got to see and touch, a computer was through this program. And where, it was such a fulfilling experience, hearing him at their graduation ceremony, where actually he was the guest speaker, and he spoke about the fourth industrial revolution, so you can imagine, the impact, the program had on him, moving from not have seen or touched a computer before to a point where he could actually speak around the fourth industrial revolution. So just in a nutshell, and I will just open up for question later on. This program, it's very close to Accenture, and we are doing everything our best to ensure that, we support and we see young people who are disabled empowered within the ICT sector. Bowen, I'll leave it from there, and if there are questions, I'll take them. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Patricia. That is an amazing sharing of how the program has transformed a young person's life to become confident in pursuing a career. So now I would like to invite Nakou from the Global Network for Young People with Disabilities to talk to us about what we can do to create enabling environments for young persons with disabilities to access to skills development and jobs. So I'm going to see if Leku can join us.
Yes, Bowen, I'm there. Thank you, everyone. I am Leku, member of the Global Network for Young People with Disabilities. This presentation is on creating and enabling empowerment for young people with disabilities to access skills development and distant work. This is what worked for me and what my employers did, and I find it good. So that's why I'm here today to share the good practices with us all. Next. Key definitions. Enabling environment is making an environment accessible and safe for everybody. Skill development is the productive capability acquired through all levels of learning and training occurring in formal, non-formal, informal, and on the job setting. Introduction. Every young person with disability have the right to an accessible and equal opportunity to job, because they deserve to obtain their dream jobs. All these are possible when disability inclusion becomes deliberate and intentional. When employers are skill-oriented, believe in diversity, and they don't just judge or draw conclusions based on the disability of the applicant. Ways to create an enabling environment for young people with disability to access skills development and distant work. First, they must promote disability integration by changing organizational structure to suit young person with disability. They need to be flexible in the workplace and create a conducive environment for young person with disability is extremely important. This does not imply that you have to change your company policy. Rather, you look at the learning potentials and the attitude the employee as towards the job. Secondly, employers should stop assigning young people with disability to positions that they think are suitable because they think that their disability do not permit them to occupy certain positions, or they won't have to handle their work pressure. Youth with disability do have potential, and employers ought to take note of that. Thirdly, employers must not approach disability inclusion in the workplace from a social responsibility perspective, because the result won't be visible. Rather, they should approach it as a value-added transaction, because young persons with disabilities are very efficient and committed in whatever they do. That's why we put in our best to ensure that the task which is required of us in the workplace is done well and in a timely manner, because we know our responsibilities towards our jobs and colleagues. Young persons with disabilities employers should consider reasonable accommodation for young persons with disabilities. That his or her function and the job that he or she is going in, and decide what is disabling the employee, and see if they can remove or minimize the barriers. This will create a conducive working environment and will help us attain independence in the workplace. Solutions to effectively promote inclusion for young people with disabilities in workplace. Employers and stakeholders must accept and recognize the potential and skills of young persons with disabilities and bring out the value in them. Young persons with disabilities are innovators, because we live in a world that was not designed for us, and we are skillful and have potentials which can contribute to the growth of any organization we are working in. Employers.
Due to the technical difficulties that we're experiencing, and given the amount of time we have left, so thank you, Leku, for sharing with us your thoughts on how to make the workplace inclusive for young people with disabilities. The presentations can be made available for all of you to view afterwards. So in the meantime, I would like to invite our last speaker, Dorodi, who is the Senior Technical Manager from the International Disability Alliance, to share some experiences from the Inclusion Works program. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Bowen, and also welcome and thank you to all the participants at this webinar. It's really amazing to see so many of you joining this very important discussion today. I do have a PowerPoint, but I will not use it because we're running short of time. I will quickly, and also, I would want to connect my points to speakers who have already made their presentations, because there's a lot of connections to what I was going to present in any case, and our colleagues, the organizers, would be making the PowerPoints available to you later. So as Bowen mentioned, I intended to speak about the experiences of the International Disability Alliance. So I am representing the International Disability Alliance here, or IDA, which is a global alliance of organizations of persons with disabilities. Through our 14 members, we have a connection to around 1,100 disability organizations around the world. So IDA is a global network of OPDs, Organizations of Persons with Disabilities. Our role in the Inclusion Works program, so the Inclusion Works program was a 3-year consortium program which was funded by the UK government, by UK Aid, and it was operational in Bangladesh, Kenya, Nigeria, and Uganda. So since we're focusing on youth with disabilities and employment, so I'll just present a couple of examples from our experiences working on skills training for youth with disabilities through this program. So the one of the aims of the Inclusion Works program was to find a connection between the supply side and the demand side. So when we say supply side, we mean job seekers with disabilities, and the demand side, we mean employers who are looking to employ job seekers with disabilities. So we felt that it was important to focus on how to bridge the current what we call missing middle. So I was listening to the presentations before me, and Jürgen presented a lot of data about the status of employment for youth with disabilities globally. And I think it's important, one important point that he made was the fact that there is currently a gap between the existing skills within the population of young persons with disabilities and the skills that employers are really looking for, which means that youth with disabilities are not really or at least we can draw an assumption from that finding that youth with disabilities are not really finding access to the mainstream skills training programs which are available to anybody who wants to access the open labor market. So we're still not making these mainstream trainings accessible to persons with disabilities. So when you look at, one of the reasons that, at least from our experiences also that we saw, was that we are still approaching inclusive employment, including providing skills training from a very narrow lens. We are still not looking to create all the preconditions that are necessary for inclusion, meaningful inclusion. So we are still trying to take people, persons with disabilities in this case, young persons with disabilities in this case, and fitting them to existing skills training program. We are not asking how can this training be made accessible and available to all persons with disabilities. Rather, we are going out and trying to find out, okay, who among these cohort of young persons with disabilities can access this training. So the adaptation that is required to ensure true inclusion and accessibility are still lagging behind. We're still not focusing on creating the preconditions that are necessary for inclusion for all persons with disabilities. We're still looking at it from a very narrow lens. So what does this mean when we say that we're looking at it from a very narrow lens and we're looking at the data? I think it's important to look at who's being left behind. And we'll see that most people, most persons with disabilities who are left behind from the skills training programs are those who are from underrepresented groups, or those who have greater support needs or greater accessibility and reasonable accommodation needs, which a lot of times we are unable to provide, or perhaps we don't even think on those lines, it is necessary to provide those reasonable accommodation and accessibility and support services. So, I'll give you two examples of a skills training program that we supported through the Inclusion Works program, primarily led by our colleagues at Site Savers. And I see from the chat that we have colleagues from Site Savers here. So this Inclusion Works program was led by Site Savers in these 4 countries, and IDA was one of the other partners. We were one of the core partners of the program. So one of the trainings that happened through the Inclusion Works program was the Bridge IT Academy through the National Industrial Training Authority of Kenya, where 34, I think, persons with disabilities were trained on IT skills. As a OPD partner of this program, working together with the national umbrella OPD of Kenya, UDPK, United Disabled Persons of Kenya, and our OPD engagement officer, we worked with Site Savers, we worked with and NITA, the National Industrial Training Authority, to really kind of shift the lens from with which we look at making trainings available to persons with disabilities. So we asked ourselves, does this selection criteria automatically exclude a lot of people? Because when we look at IT skills, we really ask for some high basic education or academic qualifications, such as probably a high school diploma, or sometimes even a 3-year college or something of those sort. Those gatekeeping or those application criteria automatically exclude a lot of persons with disabilities who may not have, for a variety of reasons, access to mainstream education, and therefore have not had the opportunity to go through the mainstream testing processes, which then means that they do not have a high school leaving diploma. So our question, and then there are other criteria, mostly in IT training programs, such as coding skills, demonstrated coding skills. If a person with disability has not had access to proper IT skills training, then to have a certain fundamental understanding of coding might not really be available or might not even apply. So we really ask ourselves, how do we make this application process simpler, to make sure that we are not automatically excluding or discriminating against some people with disabilities who may have the aptitude for this particular training, but do not currently meet the criteria as described in the existing format because of the barriers that exist already in the education system. So we try to change this access, the application process, and we worked with the cohort through providing reasonable accommodation, accessibility, individualized support, etc. And now we have a whole cohort of young persons with disabilities trained in IT who now have found internships in mainstream organizations in Safaricom, for example. So really, we need to start asking and looking at employment from a different lens, not fitting people to existing jobs, but really looking at inclusion overall from a larger lens to make sure that we are asking ourselves, how does this job or how does this training be made accessible to everyone? And we really need to work with organizations of persons with disabilities to create these preconditions, to provide this individualized supports, and especially ensure that the groups that are traditionally marginalized and traditionally underrepresented don't continue to be excluded from the trainings and employment opportunities that we are currently working on. Thank you so much for this opportunity, and I'm sorry I rushed a little bit, but I hope that we still have some time for questions, and I'll drop in my email ID, and I'm happy to answer any questions, and also share some links with you on the chat so that you can access some of the resources we have through this program. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dorodi, and to all of our speakers. And this concludes our knowledge sharing portion. We have about 10 minutes left for Q&A. thank you to everyone who's been commenting in the chat box and engaging in the discussions. So at this time, I'd like to invite the speaker to turn on the cameras so that we can all see you. And then also, I will ask 2 questions that we have from the audience. So the first one, I think, would be a good one for Patricia, is what are your thoughts on how young women with disabilities could be given opportunities to participate in the skills development initiatives that you have participated in?
Okay. Thank you so much, Bowen. Maybe just to answer your question, I'll actually try to look at various opportunities that organizations can actually create, and especially around young women. What our experience at Accenture has been that, when we do this program, we are like very intentional in terms of the targets that we set. That we're going to be looking for so many women, looking at gender, ethnicity, and so forth. So if you set good targets right up front, this create an opportunity, to know that, what you are actually working towards. And also, I think what would also work much better is like, if you look at technology has come and created opportunities for all. So if we look at increasing digital work, to promote inclusion for youth with disability and specifically around women. So if we create job opportunities that actually people with disability can even do at home, they don't have to be at work to do that. And these platforms that we have, they can actually encourage in increasing the numbers, and also looking at innovative ways that other organizations have to ensure that the gap is closed. One program that we have at Accenture is what we call Skills to Succeed Academy. It's a reg readiness preparation program, which is a innovative assimilation program where actually individuals can go in and learn at the very basic things, like how do you write CV, how do you go about representing yourself in interview, and you can actually simulate that. You can do your interviews, there's an opportunity to do that. So such kind of programs, they actually lead to increasing opportunities for young people with disabilities and women in particular to be, offered or to play within different spaces, like what we've done in Accenture is to ensure that, we're specifically looking at ICT, and, anyone and everyone can actually do that. And maybe just lastly, Bowen, in closing, what we're doing here in South Africa as well is that we go beyond legislative targets. If, for instance, employment equity policy in South Africa says we need to have 2% headcount of people with disabilities, but Accenture is stretching it to 3.5%. Thanks.
Thank you, Patricia. We have time for one last question, and I'm opening it to all of the speakers. So in your opinion, what could be done by different stakeholders in order to destigmatize disability and to empower youth with disabilities to unleash their potentials? So I wonder if Jürgen or Haibin would like to comment on this.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Bowen. I can go first, but also curious to hear what other panelists are thinking about destigmatizing disability and what the different stakeholders can do about it. I think, first of all, first and foremost, we need to make sure that people with disabilities are more visible when it comes to interaction with anybody in society, including actors in the labor market. So encouraging actors in the labor market, governments, employers, workers, to actually approach organizations of persons with disabilities, but also organizations with persons with disabilities to reach out to those who make decisions on employment, just because there's a lot of misunderstanding or misconceptions about what disability is, what people with disabilities can and cannot do. Just bringing people with and without disabilities together, that I think is already an important step to dismantle some of the preconceived ideas. But then that's important. I think at the same time, internally in organizations, companies, governments, there needs to be more awareness training. That can be done, of course, also by, I think, very effective if persons with disabilities themselves conduct awareness raising workshops in companies and organizations. But also you can have more online courses, like in the ILO, for example. We have a mandatory online course for anybody who works in the ILO to learn about disability, which we hope addresses some of the biases and preconceived ideas. There's a lot of awareness raising in person or online, but also the interaction, I think, is very key, that people who have not had, I think everybody has had some exposure to disability, but the way we interact, how we see people with disabilities, that is still lacking. But thanks so much. Curious to hear what others think about it.
Thank you so much, Jürgen. I see Dorodi would like to add a few comments, and then we'll wrap up.
Thank you so much, Bowen. And just building on what Jürgen said, I think, yes, we need to have, employers need to start taking the first steps and go ahead and employ persons with disabilities, while simultaneously also working to create a more inclusive workplace. I think one of the important messages which really help in destigmatizing disability at the workspace is to show leadership from the highest offices. I think if we have demonstrated commitment from the top echelons of an organization, then it really trickles down to show that the organization is truly committed to being inclusive, and that really sends a very clear message. It becomes the organization itself becomes a role model. So I think we need to really talk to the C-suite people in order to make that change.
Yes, Bowen, for me, I think employers and stakeholders must look at disability inclusion as a competitive advantage when nobody wants to be treated. Because if the young people with disability are feeling that their work is being felt and appreciated, they will do more. And if they're not left behind, the working environment will be good for them and it will bridge the stigma. Thank you.
Thank you. Now with Leku. So that concludes that insightful discussion. An hour is really not enough for us to go through all of these important points to look at how to make jobs and skills inclusive for young persons with disabilities. So after this webinar, it is only just the beginning. So we invite you to join the community forum to continue the discussion that we have started. So once again, thank you to the speakers for sharing their knowledge. And on a personal level, as someone who does a lot of work in advocating for young persons who have hearing loss, we offer like awareness raising training on what unique strengths and skills that people with hearing loss can bring into the workplace, such as communication and attention to details. So to wrap up this wonderful event, so as we've heard from all of our speakers, we need to continue working on coordinating our actions together in order to make the world of work more inclusive of young persons with disabilities. So now, at the end of this webinar, please do watch out for an email invitation to join the Youth Foresight Virtual Community Forum. So thank you for joining us today, and have a great rest of your day. Take care. Bye-bye.